Hey yogi friends, Kit Kat here and welcome to this masterclass on balancing. So balancing is something that we do every day in our lives. It doesn't necessarily involve leaping into Warrior 3 and somehow magically finding your balance there. Although that can be kind of a fun adventure. Balancing can be as simple as finding your grounded connection onto the earth. As I work through my feet here, moving to all four corners of my feet, rolling my shoulders back, finding my center of gravity and ignoring the mosquito on my left arm, I can come and find stillness as I find that balance within my body. And it actually feels really peaceful and really nice. So in this tutorial, which is going to be fairly brief, we're just going to look at a couple of things that can impact your balance. In our yoga asana practice, there are a plethora of different balances. So it could be Warrior 3 that I just showed you before, or Ekapada Tadasana, where we lift the knee into the chest, drawing the belly into the spine. It could also be tree pose, or this is when we're moving into a variation of tree pose, and coming into figure 4, where I find my balance, stretch into my piriformis in the back, buried underneath my glutes. It could be finding that length in the hamstring and indeed all the way into the arm, and then a little bit of hip mobility and flexibility as we extend that out to the side. There are so many different things that we can do. Arm balance is included, as well as handstand. There are a couple of top tips that I like to think of or remind myself of as I move into my balances. One of the first things is connection to breath. So finding that mindful connection to breath. We've talked a lot about breath in this In Breathe, Bend, Sit, Sustain. And the reason that we do is because it grounds us and connects us and brings us into this present moment, and also activates the parasympathetic nervous system. So bringing us to a place of calm centeredness, and that is what enables us to find that balance, because we start eliminating all of the distractions and the pusing, which is what we call it here in Bali, which pusing literally means that you're kind of spinning around, that there's a dizziness or a craziness going on. Gila is actually the word for crazy, but pusing kind of describes that, everything's going too fast for me kind of scenario that we find ourselves in. For us, in English, the kind of broader translation or bigger translation, or even more specific, might be ruminating, where we just keep on that trajectory of spinning around and round until those thoughts become a little bit overwhelming. Anyway, getting back to the point, connection to breath is super important in every single balance. So before you go to move into a balance, find your grounded connection wherever you are, whether it's being seated on the mat or indeed if you are standing and doing a standing balance. So finding that grounded connection, and you might even close the eyes and just drop into that space and just allow your body to feel where it needs to be. And as you breathe in through the nose, out through the nose, just allowing the breath to settle into the body and bring you into this present moment. So just creating that sense of stillness before you go and move into any balance that you are considering. The second thing, which is just super easy to remember, is steady gaze, steady balance. So where your eyes go, your body's going to flow. So I can chuck at you like 100 different little yogi mantras that will kind of keep you in this space. But steady gaze, steady balance is a super important one. When we're taking a balance, we need to find one place in which to focus. So I'm going to use my mat as an example here, because finding that one place in which to focus our attention, actually when we're looking at meditation, we start to bring the breath into the body under our control, and we start to focus on that one point, which is our breath in and out. And balancing is kind of the same, except we've got our eyes open most of the time. So we've connected to the breath, And we're finding that one point of focus. And when we find that one point of focus and connect to the breath, we create pratyahara, withdrawal of the senses. So which means basically sausages and watermelon aren't going to distract you. So finding that one point of focus, extremely important. And then we're going to have that steady gaze, and that's going to help us create steady balance. So I am gazing roughly here. I'm in the center of my mat, and I'm gazing, because I'm standing, probably about, I'd say, 8 foot in front of me. If you have a wall like this, super handy, especially these little guys here. If I'm facing the wall, I can use one of those as a point of focus. If the trees aren't blowing outside of the shala and there's no wind, which there is no wind this morning, and it is super sweaty here in Bali, I can pick something out in the garden that is going to hold my focus. So for the point of this balance, though, I am looking literally about 8 foot in front of me, and there are some nails in the floor. And I'm going to keep my gaze, find my steadiness, my Sthira Sukhanasanam in this shape. Take an inhale breath, rise up onto my toes, and here we are in a balance. I'm going to exhale my breath, bring my hands back through my heart center, and you'll notice I just use the exhale breath through the mouth because I feel like that was a calm, steady way to move through that shape. And then I'm going to Ekapada Tadasana, lift my knee into the chest. So I've still got this sense of pratyahara, a focus, my steady gaze, steady balance, steady gaze, steady mind, steady balance, steady breath, steady balance. Not thinking about sausages and watermelon, there are no distractions, and this is going to enable me to move into my warrior three. I haven't changed my gaze. I've kept that strong and steady. So you can see that I firmly believe that this really helps with your balancing. So the first point was connect into the breath and find that stillness. The second one is steady gaze, steady balance. The third tip here is to go slow. As soon as you start to rush at your balances, I've got 100 things going on, sausages and watermelon, blurp, out you fall. So steady gaze, connect into the breath, steady gaze, steady balance. And the third one is to go slow. So say I'm going to use handstand as an example here. So if I kick up really fast into handstand, like that doesn't really, I'm using a lot of momentum there, and I'm going to find my balance. But if I was to do that in the center, which I won't because I know what will happen, is that momentum and that rushing to get into that shape is going to make me fall out to the other side. So as we move into some of these more challenging balances, going slow is super helpful. So I'm looking where I'm going. Again, I've fixed my gaze, steady balance, and I'm going to lift up. Maybe I don't get there the first time, and that's okay. I adjust and I move. And then I find my space and I'm in handstand. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't, and that's perfectly okay too. So first point, connection to breath. Second, steady gaze, steady balance. Third, go slow. Fourth, you might fall out, so don't be afraid of that. So failure or falling out is not a bad thing. When you're balancing, maybe you might get distracted, and it might take you a couple of goes to get into that. When I don't, you saw in that first handstand or the second or third handstand, when I kicked up, I didn't get all the way up there. Now, I was talking at the same time, and that can be a distraction in itself, and that's something that as a teacher or a sharer of practice improves for me every time I jump in front of a class or go to share something that I'm teaching, be that in my reel or in a video like this. But it doesn't mean that every time I go into a shape it's going to be perfect, because it's not, or that I'm going to achieve the outcome that I want, because maybe I won't. But what it does teach me is where my edge is on that particular day. So maybe I've just found out that I need to lift my hips a little higher in that in that handstand, and so then I can make that adjustment. Maybe I needed to switch the core on a little bit more, so I can make that adjustment. Maybe I need to kick up a little slower so that I can lift all the way into that space. And this is true for every single one of our shapes. The other day, or yesterday rather, we did our tutorial on Bakasana or crow. So as I come into my crow, my steady gaze, I've taken a connection to the breath, my steady gaze is out in front of me here. I'm reaching my hands forward, I'm going slow. And then I'm still reaching my gaze forward, and then I'm lifting into this space. So if I rush at this, what's going to happen is I'm going to probably miss one of those really important contributing factors to the success of that shape and probably roll into a forward roll. And that will make me roll back, and it'll be all sorts of fun. And luckily we're close to the ground, so it doesn't really matter. So the 4 points for balancing success here: connection to breath, steady gaze, steady balance. Lost number 3. It's not very handy, is it? Connection to breath, steady gaze, steady balance, going slow and not being afraid of falling out. Because falling out is not failure, it's just finding your edge. So the number 5 point here, which I love, is that, I don't love these mozzies this morning though. It's so sweaty here in Bali, so it's probably about 8:30, it's 8:35, I can see on the clock over there. I've already been for a beach walk and it was just super sweaty. So, and there's lots of mozzies around because we're in rainy season. So welcome to Bali. So you can probably see I'm sweating here in my Just Breathe t-shirt or singlet. Okay, so the final point about this is how and why we balance, and what does it actually mean when we're not standing on the rubber rectangle. So as we come into our practice and we find that connection to breath, steady gaze, steady balance, we move through slow into our shape, and we're not afraid of falling out. All of those lessons are so applicable off the mat. And this is one of the beautiful things about balancing, is that as we find our calm control, and just as an example here, we'll go into Padangusthasana. As we find our slow control and we move into shapes that perhaps we haven't explored before or haven't explored in a little while, it teaches us to find this calm control. And so it's almost like a meditation that's happening up here as we bring all of these different little contributing factors to success, our success in balancing, into play. And whatever's happening on the rubber rectangle directly rolls out into real life. So if I'm able to find stillness in these shapes as I move around the rubber rectangle, imagine the impact that that's going to have on your life off the rubber rectangle. And it's certainly been the case for me. There's a lot of, I've spoken about this before in previous tutorials, a lot of craziness in my life, had depression, anxiety, 7 years, and all of that ruminating and craziness started to dissipate the minute I stepped on my rubber rectangle. And it was actually what drew me further along my journey, because I was like, why is this stuff impacting, like I'm feeling it here, and all the tears that I'd cry and the sweat and everything that would happen on the mat. And I would take what happened without any knowledge of the practice or the philosophy of yoga at that point in time. What was happening on the mat, I would find this sense of calm and, being able to apply some of those strategies that I'd learned or that had evolved for me on the mat, take them out into real life. And so I found myself being a more calm and considered individual in my negotiating, in my interactions in life. Just, even if there were stress points, not liking going grocery shopping in peak hour when everyone leaves work. Like, I can't actually think of anything worse than that. Well, apart from sitting in like heaps of traffic and driving 5 minutes from your house to your place of work, and it just been gridlock in Sydney. A couple of my pet peeves there. But what I guess I want to say, and the message that I want to give here, is that what happens on the rubber rectangle directly impacts you off the mat. So the skills that you're learning here are completely transferable, and that's particularly true for balancing. As we start to learn how to find this moving meditation, how these things come together and impact our asana practice, the yoga shapes on the mat. But then as we journey out into our day, we take that sense of calm, that considered, grounded self on a journey through our day. And those are some of the things that are really significant contributors to our joy and happiness, not just on this rubber rectangle, but definitely outside in the real world. So my yogi friends, this is our little class today, our tutorial on balancing. Next up, you are going to be looking at crow pose. I kind of reflected on that earlier, but the next masterclass after this one is, because I shot that 2 days ago, but the next masterclass after this one is in fact Bakasana or crow pose, and we're going to work into that. As we work through some of our anytime flows, your pajama flow and the morning flow practices, you're going to see different balances come into play there. And certainly as your yoga journey evolves, you will be playing with different balances, and you might even be creating some of your own or exploring some of the super traditional balances that come up in our hatha or ashtanga vinyasa practice. So the other thing to note here is that if you head over to my YouTube channel, there's a heap of mini flows in there, and they will take you through all sorts of different balances. So from plank pose to standing balances and seated balances. So even finding that Navasana is, where you're in boat pose on the floor here, even this requires a certain degree of balance. So finding that space or that place where you are going to be able to maintain your balance and lift up into that shape, and maybe even explore other shapes. Balances don't always have to be on the hands or on one leg. They can be in all sorts of different spaces. And you can see my body kind of recalibrating to hold me in this balance. So if you head over to YouTube, you'll be able to find a whole host of mini flows, and I've put those actually into a playlist, and there's balances integrated into those practices. If you follow my reels as well, quite often on Instagram, often I will break down a balancing shape and talk about how to move into that and some of the modifications so that you can make that transition from beginner yogi into a confident yogi, and having those experiences that enable you to move into those shapes. So I think that's everything. If you have a question about balancing, or there's a particular balance that perhaps you haven't seen me explain or break down or create a tutorial for, I'm super open to suggestions and yogi challenges. So feel free to put a post in our Facebook group, and indeed post your experiences. Whack up a photo of you in your favorite balance. If there are any modifications that you would like to a specific balance, always happy to break those down. My yogi friends, I am indeed balancing on my toes right now, lifting all the way up and falling over. Have a fantastic day, and I will see you in our next tutorial, which is Bakasana, and we will be exploring our first hand balance in crow. Namaste.